Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm back. It's me, Robert Phoenix. It says I'm live, and it's good to get that confirmation every day. It says I'm live. It doesn't say you're alive, but it does say I'm live. So here I am, the hardest working man in astrology, and the daily updates and stream of consciousness, as it were. I have no problem saying that. James Brown said he was the hardest working man in soul, right? James Brown was the hardest working man in soul music. I could be the James Brown of astrology. Can I identify as the James Brown of astrology? Can I get a get down? Can I get a get down as the James Brown of astrology? You know, it's really interesting. I was thinking about this yesterday. You know, we went through a phase about 2 years ago, not that long ago. Seems like another lifetime now. But we went through a phase where people are identifying as certain things. Like they were identifying. I mean, you could identify as a woman if you were a man. You could do that. You could identify as a man if you're a woman. There was a guy that I self-identified as a 9-year-old girl, and he was like, what, 48, and he was all trannied up, and he got adopted by a family. So there's a lot of you could self-identify with anything, really. I mean, isn't that what we've sort of set up now, right? So think about the possibilities. Think about the possibilities. If we can self-identify as anything, then why can't so-called white people self-identify as black now? Seems to work for Sean King, by the way. But, you know, this is something that people need to kind of wrap their heads around. And of course, the Supreme Court just made a major decision that is going to allow trans athletes to compete against girls. So, you know, all they have to do is take a few shots here and there, grow their hair out, and go stomp some ass at the local track meet, because they can't compete with other males at their level. Like they would be maybe finishing 5th or 6th or 7th, maybe in their heats, but they dominate when they cross over that line and then begin to self-identify as a trans, which allows them to be a part of that whole other, spectrum of competition. So, I mean, you know, this whole self-identification thing is I think it can be very empowering, very, very, very empowering. And who's to say, right? Who's to say that we can't self-identify with anything? So today, if I wanted to self-identify as an Eskimo, I could do that if I wanted to. Am I right? I think I could. You know, and I could change it up every day. Tomorrow I can self-identify as somebody from outer Mongolia. Maybe on Sunday I'll show up as an Indian, native of the Amazon basin. I just, there's so many ways that I can self-identify, and so can you. Why limit yourself to just one race? I think it's very limiting. It's a very limiting concept. Very, very limiting. You should try it on sometime. Try it on sometime. So today I'm Inuit. I'm going to be Inuit, and I've got some uncooked fish in the refrigerator, and I'm just going to eat it raw because I want to know what it's like to just eat raw fish. That'll be part of my. You probably have to do one act each day to fortify and buttress your new identification. I think that's probably important. And with the massive amounts of variety and people and cultures and ethnicities and races, you could experience a wide gamut of potentiality in being. Why limit yourself to just kind of one culture or one race? Or that's true diversity. You can experience the spectrum of diversity inside of you by identifying with a particular group for that day. It seems to work in other areas. Why not this? Why not this? Right? And then you can like flip it up. You can definitely flip it up. Like I could identify as a black Jewish homosexual like next week and see what that feels like. Kind of like Sammy Davis Jr., although he was bi, I think. The possibilities are endless. Free your mind. Free your mind. Unshackle your mind. Don't be chained down by this idea that you could just be one identity. It lifts us up. It joins us with the breadth of humanity. All right. So let me just say hi to everybody. Let's see. We got Misty Miner. Hello, Misty. There's Joan S. in the house. Hello, Joan. Steve Mercer. What's going on, Steve? Thor at the door. That's my nickname for Steve. Thor at the door. Stevie 33. Good morning. Fup 77. Good morning. Judy Anderson. Hi, Judy. Good to see you. Cheryl Oshiavo. Hello, Cheryl. Uncle Glenn. What's happening? Playing the hot corner. Nancy Dickerson in the house. Top of the morning. Top of the morning to you, Nancy. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Identity labels divide us more than unite us. I say no labels. I say no labels. So I think we live in a very paradoxical universe, right? Very paradoxical universe. Because you are God and you are not God. You're the center of the universe and you're not the center of the universe. You are a thing and you're not that thing. This is the beauty of how we figure this stuff out here on this planet. It's the great cosmic Zen cone that we all encounter at some point, right? So yesterday was really cool, like that synchronicity with Kane, who came on to the show. I don't know if he's going to be here today, but man, that was so cool yesterday. It was really, really cool. It's like, yeah, this is where my mother comes from. And the guy actually lives there. He lives there, and he was on the show, right? I mean, so I did self-identify for a moment with my mother being Irish from that place, right? If I didn't do that, I wouldn't have had that experience with him, which was kind of interesting, right? So it was a point of contact. Is that a label? I don't know if it's a label or not, but certainly was a sense of, well, who knows? Shared genetic identity. I don't know. Maybe I'm even related to him at some point. This is really interesting, right? But at the same time, and this is what Ole Damigard and I did get into yesterday. I had a fantastic interview with Ole Damigard, and I can't wait to play for you guys tomorrow. It was really, really good. So impressed with him. Not just as somebody who is a really super high level decoder, but he's a really, really spiritual cat, very spiritual guy. And, I read people, right? I can go pretty deep into people, and he popped up on my screen. I'm like, oh boy, this guy is not from here. He is not from here. He is like a galactic emissary from another world. I highly recommend watching the interview. It'll be really, really good. It's really good. But he's also not a lightweight. He's not a woo guy, but he's deeply spiritual. And this is the thing that I've been trying to court in my own life, is to move from the woo and deeper into the spiritual connection. Because that's where it's at. It's a great interview. I can't wait to play it for you guys tomorrow. Jack Kairos in the house. Let's see. Dawn Hart. Hi, Dawn. Diana Young. Let's see. There's Anna Wilson. Stevie 33. I can't wait. Maury Demers. What's going on, Mr. Maury? How about no attachment to labels, identities? Maybe that's more realistic. I think it's really. I think that's good. I mean, I think being able to transcend, like if you're like, I'm a spirit having a human experience. Yeah, sure. We're spiritual beings having a human and physical experience, right? So there is this oneness, right? There's this oneness that we do experience and share in this idea of a logos, which Michael Jones talked about on the video yesterday. That is true. That is true. And I also come back to that each individual has a very potent piece of their own personal expression. So if, let's say, somebody really identifies with their Celtic roots, or somebody really identifies with their Jamaican roots, like, I think that's kind of important, right? I think these things are important. They lend this connection to a part of their soul, and there's an ancestral connection that brings them into this very rich and fertile ground in many cases. And from that point, if we can bring all that together, right, into one, I hate to use the word umbrella now, under one umbrella, because it's been a hijacked symbol, apparently, then we have a really wonderful panoply. We have a really wonderful opportunity to be individualized, and have a shared experience at a macro level. And I've always felt that way in my life. So when you really and Sue, maybe really what it's about, and not identifying, I think that's actually pretty important in a lot of ways too. It's a really interesting dance, isn't it? Because when we identify with certain things, we hold on to those things, and then they become our coda, and they become our raison d'etre. And that can only work for so long, because all those things, think about your own life. Think about some of the things you were into, like when you were 20, 21, 22, 25, 30. Like, are you still into those things? Do you still identify with those things? I don't. Maybe there are pieces of those things that are still a part of me, but I don't. I mean, I was really, really, really into the whole Findhorn trip. I was like so taken with Findhorn. And my first introduction to Findhorn was the movie My Dinner with Andre. And to this day, My Dinner with Andre is one of the most important movies ever made. It's a great, great movie. Great movie. And it wasn't just the Findhorn piece. The entire movie blew my mind. I'd love to play you a clip from the movie, but I can't because of the copyright restrictions. And it's when Andre Gregory talks about the idea of a totalitarian state, and he's so prescient. It's a very, very prophetic part of the movie. But when he talked about Findhorn, which he kind of got wrong, it really grabbed my attention, right? So I was like, man, I was like, I'll never forget when I saw the movie. It was in San Francisco. I was with my girlfriend. It was down in the what is that area? Like Bay, like Waldorf Street, right around that area. It's kind of financially, I think. Yeah, kind of financially. Anyway, so I was there, and I remember watching that movie, just being absolutely mesmerized. That movie changed my life. That was one of those pivotal times with my consciousness. So I really got into Findhorn. I'm like, well, I got to find out more about this Findhorn thing. So eventually I ran across this book, which was this Findhorn put it out. If you don't know about Findhorn, it was a community that was started by Eileen and Peter Caddy and Dorothy McLean. And there's another woman involved. What was her name? Sheila. I think her name might have been Sheila. She's not the one that's talked about, by the way. It's always Peter, Eileen, and Dorothy. And so what they did is that these three people didn't have a pot to piss in, went to basically a trailer park in the north of Scotland near Findhorn Bay, pretty much right on Findhorn Bay. And this is a kind of near Inverness. That's, I think, probably one of the closer areas there. So what they did is they got seaweed and all this stuff from the bay, and they started to connect with the Davic energies of the land there, and they started to grow these massive vegetables. Right, they were growing cabbages that were the size of medicine balls. Right, so this got the attention of the BBC, and it's like, oh, look, here's this group of people in Scotland that are growing record-setting vegetables. This could be the we could solve world hunger here, right? The crisis of world hunger. So the background was that Peter Caddy was RAF, Royal Air Force. He was also, if I'm not mistaken, a Rosicrucian. And Eileen Caddy was really just kind of an average working class British girl who had been sort of recruited and then mesmerized by Peter. And then Dorothy McLean, and I've met all three of them, by the way. And I had more contact with Dorothy and Peter than Eileen. I just sat in meditation with Eileen because I went to Findhorn. And Eileen Caddy and all her kind of, old gal pal friends would always be there every day. Meditation, meditation, meditation. So I never said anything to her. It's like, I didn't need to. Organic. It was all about organic. But I did hang out with Peter in California. That was later on. And Dorothy, I had met, I think, what about maybe 2 years after that in Wisconsin. And I really liked Dorothy a lot. But Dorothy was a member of the OSS, okay? So Dorothy worked for Canadian intelligence, all right? So you can see the intelligence threads going through Findhorn. Peter, RAF, Rosicrucians, Esoteric, spies, right? It works. It's connected. Because spies traffic in hidden information. And what do we use as a word for hidden? Occult. Occult. The information is occulted. It is kept away from us. We don't see it. Right? So a lot of these people who are quote unquote spies are also, just by their nature, they're occultists. And sometimes they're both. Because Aleister Crowley was also a spy. Of course he was. He was a total spy. L. Ron Hubbard, who was a major occultist, was a master spy. When he started running Scientology, his whole goal with Scientology was, well, number one, he created Scientology because he'd written the book Dianetics. And Dianetics, he sold a shitload of Dianetics. He started to get all this money from the book sales, and people were sending him money. So he had to create a church in order to deal with that money. So that's when he created the Church of Scientology, was post Dianetics. But he had bigger plans. So what he would do is he would use the audit process to work with people inside of foreign governments. And of course, the auditing is when you would get clear and all that stuff. And through the auditing process, they knew who exactly they were auditing. And they would get information, right? And they'd pass it on, they'd sell it, they would do whatever. So L. Ron Hubbard was a spy master. Anyway, we see occultism, spying, very, very much connected in a lot of ways, right? Because they share the word occult together. And when I look at somebody like Peter Strzok, who we're going to talk about today, by the way, when I look at somebody like Peter Strzok, and I watched him, and he's a spy. The guy's a spy. I mean, he works for the CIA and the FBI, one of the few people who really can do that and bounce back and forth. So by their nature, spies are occultists. That's what they are. They're occultists. And by their nature, occultists are actually spies. Wrap your head around that. But when I looked at Peter Strzok, I'm like, whoa, this guy is really an occultist. Like, whoa, there is some heavy duty, dark energy around this dude in a big way. And I think not just because you run into those people who have dark energy, and sometimes they're just like rag dolls, being kind of tossed around, spiritually tossed around and possessed because they drink too much or they do drugs or whatever. And there's dark energy around them, right? We all have remnants of it. I'm sure I have some remnants of dark energy in my field too. Wouldn't doubt it. Not perfect. But then there are people who have really dark energy because, well, that's what they do. They invoke it. It becomes part of their power source. Anyway, the Findhorn thing was a very interesting time for me. Very interesting. I went there. I had a mind-blowing experience. I wound up getting to Findhorn through this kind of random thing. Somebody came to our door one day. I was living at my grandparents' place in Millbrae, California. And we're all under one roof because my parents were having a house built. And I was like still living at home at college. So somebody came to the door and was looking to get people to subscribe to magazines. So I'm like, okay, let me subscribe to one. So I went, oh, what about this one? And I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, Yoga Journal. I think I subscribed to Yoga Journal. So I get my first issue, maybe 2 months later. I read through the thing. I go to the back. And then there was a little classified about a group of people. They're advertising, hey, do you want to go to Findhorn? You want to have an experience of it might have been New Age. Was there a New Age magazine? I think it might have been New Age magazine back then. I think that's what it was. It wasn't Yoga Journal. I think it was New Age magazine or New Age Journal. I think that's what it was. Anyway, it's a little tiny classified. I was like, whoa, yeah, hey, I'm really into this. I was getting ready to graduate. I was thinking, well, what do I want to do after I graduate? I had two ideas, two options in my head. One, Robert Bly, was going to take people into the caves in the south of France, right? Lascaux. And they were going to get into the pictographs and all that stuff. I'm like, wow, that sounds kind of interesting. Get to hang out with Robert Bly, go into those caves. Then there was this Findhorn thing. I'm like, nah, I think I'm going to do this Findhorn thing. So I wrote them a letter and everything. They wrote me back. And it was through the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. And it was a very cool experience, right? The guy who was running that was a teacher at University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. And I think he was an unintentional lefty. Like he was, like Lark would say that he was a communitarian. To the bone, a communitarian. But I loved him and he was cool. I liked this guy. His name was Belden. And that was his first name. Anyway, I got in touch with him. I said, here's what you need. You need this much money, blah, 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 blah. And that was it. I think it was at that time, it was like $2,500 for the trip. And I had to get there. So I went to 1 month at a place called High Wind, which is in northern Wisconsin. It's not there anymore. The community went away. But it was started by Belden and his wife, Lisa, who'd been to Findhorn. And Lisa was so taken with Findhorn that they wanted to create this thing up in northern Wisconsin. So there was that community, very, very small. And I met some wonderful people there and some wonderful people from Wisconsin. Really just great, great, great people from Wisconsin. And then we went to another community after that. So we were there for 1 month and went to this place called Sirius, which was in Shutesbury, Massachusetts. And that was another Findhorn seed community started by Gordon Davidson and Corrine McLaughlin. Corrine passed away recently. And it was much further along than the High Wind experience. Like they were way, way into this, right? They were way into their the development of their community because they had people kind of living around the community as well as part of the community. So we were there for a month. And then after that, we went to Findhorn for a month. So I got to Findhorn. I got to experience Findhorn. And Findhorn blew my mind. It totally blew my mind. I had so many like crown chakra, second chakra. I mean, my chakras were blown wide open in Findhorn. So I did that for 3 months. In a lot of ways, that experience kind of wrecked my life, I have to say. It kind of wrecked my life because I came back and I was like, magical mystery tour. And here I am. I'm dropped back into this other world. It was like density, like super density, high density. And then I started to go to these Findhorn groups and potlucks and all that stuff. And it really became kind of a part of my life because I saw it, the potential for this kind of esoteric relationship with community and all that stuff. But it was something that faded out of my life. It just faded away. I didn't really have the same kind of connection to it. It wasn't as important to me. And I found that when I became attached to these, this group or this ideology, that I kind of outgrew it, became limiting. So this gets back to what Sue brought up in chat, and became limiting on some level. Because there's a code and there's all these things, and well, some of them are good, some of them are also, again, quite limiting as well. And I don't know what's going on with Findhorn. I think it's still around, but I heard it's not really all that great. I think I got there right at the end of the peak. Right at the end of the peak. I did meet Dorothy McLean a couple of years later, again at that place, High Wind, which was in Wisconsin, and she was lovely. Of all the three, Dorothy was by far my favorite. Jovial, funny, smart, soulful. Peter, I hung out with in California, and he could not get out of the Peter Caddy kind of script in his head. So I knew this woman who was a psychic, and a really good psychic, by the way. And she was doing these tours, like Mystical Marin. And Peter Caddy, she knew all these places that were really interesting, very, very interesting places in Marin County. And Peter Caddy was supposed to be the guide and take us into sort of the more esoteric kinds of relationships of those places. So, and he was also the father of this kid, and the woman I was kind of seeing at that time babysat his kid every now and then, right? So I had connection with the guy, and he was okay. I mean, he was kind of, he's very into the the myth of Peter Caddy. And by the way, astrologically, Peter was a Pisces, and Eileen is a Virgo. And I think Dorothy might have been a Libra. I'm not sure about that. Then I met a bunch of other people through them. There was this guy named Milenko Matanovic, who was part of this group called the New Troubadours, who are based out of Seattle. And he was a great guy, this guy, Milenko Matanovic. I love that guy. He's a great artist. Again, funny, smart, switched on. So a lot of those people were really talented people, very talented people. But I let that go, and I really don't identify with that anymore. So, we move like we are with the current, and the river of life moves through us. And I think that's called evolving. It's called evolving. And it's okay to identify with something for a while, try it on, work, see what if it fits, and wear it. And, if it doesn't fit anymore, you take it off, and, you discard it, put on something else. All right. Dear blessed and holy Father, Mother God of the great central sun with the universal light, which is the light of Yeshua, Sananda, Emmanuel, we ask that only the highest and best information, truth, and wisdom come through at this time through this channel. We ask for strength, courage, faith, and love in a time that demands that we anchor all of these qualities. And we do so in the name of the Most High and for the greatest good. We also ask that any karmic residue be cleansed, purified, clarified, removed from each and every one of us, so that we may return to our sovereign status in and through this and afterwards. So be it. All right, we got a lot to cover today. I don't even know where to start. There's so much going on today. Every day it's like a new happening, right? There's like new shit happening. It's mind-boggling. Okay. The subject of today's show has to do with programming, Manchurian candidates, and mind control on some level, right? I'm going to get into that. I'm going to stop a few places along the way, which I inadvertently do, since I kind of have a version of ADD, but I think I manage it pretty well. All right, let me just do this really quickly, and I want to just give you guys some images here. Some images you can wrap your head around. So the whole idea of the Manchurian Candidate comes from the 1962 movie that starred Lawrence Harvey. So let me put this here. It starred Lawrence Harvey, Angela Lansbury, Frank Sinatra's in the movie as well. And it's what's interesting about Frank Sinatra, and I know that Pat Vinci is going to listen to this, and she's probably going to pitch a fit, but Frank was a handler, okay? Frank was a handler. And so here we have kind of hidden in plain sight that Lawrence Harvey in the movie is handled. His handler in the movie is Angela Lansbury, right? This is if you've never seen the Manchurian Candidate, it is probably the most strikingly vivid example of hidden in plain sight mind control technology that's ever been produced and then projected onto the silver screen. Lawrence Harvey plays somebody who was captured during the Korean War. And during the Korean War, he is subjected to psychological torture and ultimately mind control, along with other soldiers who have been captured and are being forced to do things that they would not normally do. This is a very interesting picture, because if you look at all the various soldiers here, I believe that's Frank Sinatra, if I'm not mistaken, who was there with him during this time, that they're all in kind of various states of either being disinterested, distracted, whacked out, traumatized. But Lawrence Harvey is directing his gaze at this guy who is his handler now in North Korea, which is where this is all taking place. And of course, you can see the icons of socialism, Stalin and Mao, clearly displayed behind. This guy would go, I don't know his real name, but he would go on to play Wo Fat in the Hawaii Five-0 series. And this guy as Wo Fat was one of the best TV villains of all time. He was like top 5. He was top 5. He was right up there with the guy Loveless from the Wild Wild West, the really short guy in Wild Wild West. Great, great villain. But here, let me bring it back to the Manchurian Candidate. So Lawrence Harvey is being triggered to ultimately assassinate somebody, right? That's what the movie is about. That is what the movie is about. And the guy that they want to assassinate, if I'm not mistaken, is his rival. It's his rival in running for Senate. And here's Lawrence Harvey getting ready to do the dirty deed, right? So it's a very, very powerful movie. And you can see that the Queen of Diamonds is his trigger. And the Queen of Diamonds shows up whenever they want him to access the traumatized portion of his psyche, right? So it's very important. It's a really, really, really important movie on a number of levels because it shows actually what goes on behind the scenes. It shows what goes on or what went on with this very specific kind of programming that comes out of where? It comes out of China. And that programming comes out of Stalinist Russia. So we can see sort of the link in the chain of command, and it's come right into this country, by the way. Now here's Frank Sinatra, Queen of Hearts. Look at all these. You see how this Queen of Diamonds, rather. Programming. Here they are again, being addressed, being traumatized, being vilified. Again, disinterest, but Lawrence Harvey, more connected here. What's interesting about Lawrence Harvey is that his daughter, Domino, went on to become like a real life MK Ultra girl and an assassin, like a killer. She worked for like a bail bonds. There's a movie about her called Domino, which I highly recommend. I highly recommend Domino. If you haven't seen Domino, watch Domino. It's a Tony Scott movie. Tony Scott's a good director. That's a movie I want to own, by the way, on DVD. I'm buying DVDs now that I want to own. So what's interesting too about that movie, right? That's 1962. That's a year before the assassination of Kennedy. So the idea of the Manchurian Candidate was put into the public consciousness, right? And I always felt like there was this weird kind of bleed through with Lawrence Harvey and Lee Harvey Oswald. It's the Harvey, and Harvey is related to that movie with Jimmy Stewart where he sees this giant invisible rabbit. He's hallucinating about this giant invisible rabbit. And so both of them share the name Harvey, Lawrence Harvey and Lee Harvey Oswald. So I always felt like there was this connection there between the two, and it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be because the Manchurian Candidate is one of those show and tell movies, and it's also there to anchor like what you're about to believe. Because there's a whole backstory with Lee Harvey Oswald and his wife Marina and the connection to the Soviet Union, Russia, right? And I believe there is some truth to that, by the way. I believe there, and could Lee Harvey Oswald really have been a Manchurian Candidate? Sure, why not? Why not? So they were basically saying, this is how it's done. And when we kill Kennedy, you'll make the link. You'll see it, right? You'll see the link. But what you won't see are the other people moving the pieces of the chessboard around the link. You'll just make the link. So it's an interesting movie in terms of its timeliness and getting the public ready and prepared for what will happen a year after its release. Now, from a cultural perspective, it is also very telling because we are living now in a world of triggered and autonomized Manchurian candidates, and they don't even know that they are. This is what's happening. The programming, the trauma has all come together, and they're all walking around. They're all walking around. You know, whether it's a Karen or one of your neighborhood snitches or somebody who's young. I got a story to tell you today that's going to exactly relate to this. Exactly relate to this. We are now populated with millions of Manchurian candidates, and they don't even know that that's what they are. This gets into the realm of the NPC, the non-participating characters, in a lot of ways, right? Because somebody's writing a script for them, and they're trying to move out of the background and into the foreground, and they do it in a very polarizing kind of way. Here's the story. Client yesterday, very interesting woman, very, very interesting woman. And I don't know how she found me. To this day, I don't know how she found me. Super interesting woman. And moving into a point of major transformation. Major transformation. Like, she's popping the red pills, even though she doesn't know she's popping the red pills. But she is. This is what happens during a time like this. There are people that do have spontaneous awakenings. You know, there are these things in yoga, they call them kriyas, and they're these riptides of energy that move through your body, right? So we are having this kind of moments of collective kriya. These collective kriyas are kind of rippling through us, and in a lot of ways, it's very autonomous. And there are no accidents, right? Like, why did she choose me over some other astrologer? I don't know. I have no idea. So we could talk at a different level. Anyway, here's the story. She has a son who is 17 years old. And they were at a dance at a party at somebody's house. Okay. This is a private place. It's not a school. They're just hanging out. Little party action, and they were playing a rap song at this party, and they were dancing, and he was dancing with this girl. And of course, one of the most used words in rap is the N word, right? The N word. And so people are dancing, blah, 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 right? And he may have sung along with the lyrics and said the N word as part of the lyrics of the tune, which, by the way, has been going on for a long, long time, right? You go back to the late 80s, early 90s, NWA. You had all these white kids who were, spitting out the NWA lyrics, and no, NWA didn't care, right? They didn't give a shit as long as they bought their CDs and went to their concerts and made them rich. Oh, free speech. Yeah, man. You bust it out. Yeah, we're down. We're down with that, right? Oh, that's a different story now. We're living in a different timeline. So there was a girl who was there, and she caught this on her cell phone cam. And she posted this on Instagram and completely dissed this kid and outed this kid and was basically saying that he was a racist. Okay. This is in high school. And my client knows the kid through her son, right? It's a friend of his. And she said that this is not that kid. I mean, he does not have, a mean bone in his body. And he was just going along with the music. She outed him. She named his name. Right. She basically was in the act of ruining this kid, this young man, how do you think that experience is going to impact him? How do you think he's going to feel about women moving forward? Right. And if I were him and this happened, I would be really pissed. And I would have a very hard time trusting a woman moving forward. Gee, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? That girl was weaponized. She was weaponized. She's a little Manchurian candidate. She's a little Manchurian candidate. And apparently the young man's, he apologized. Right? He apologized for dancing to a tune that had a bad word and mouthing the lyric as he was dancing. And she told me that the apology felt exactly like, and this is a woman who's a lawyer, by the way, exactly like somebody that was written by a lawyer. Think about that. The family had to hire a lawyer to write a fucking apology for something that the kid should never, ever, ever have had to apologize for. Think about that. This is the state of the world that we're living in now. So she's not the only. She's one of millions of Manchurian candidates that are running around across the planet right now. It's called mind control. That's what it's about. Mind control. And they've done a really good job of traumatizing these kids. Look at all the school shootings, whether they were real or not, right? I mean, the whole thing just kind of blows my mind with these people too. And you look at some of these characters, like, where are they? Where are they now? So I like to talk about the incel shooting in Santa Barbara with Elliot Rodger. I like to talk about that specific event for a number of reasons. One of which is the fact that the Elliot Rodger character, when you look at him in the car, it looks like a crash test dummy. Okay, crash test dummy. But there was a guy who was very, very vocal at that time. And his last name was Rodriguez, theoretically. We don't even know if that's really his last name. But supposedly his son was killed during the Santa Barbara shooting. And maybe he was, maybe, I don't know. But this guy was very vocal, and he was like, in your face, in your face, in your face, in your face, in your face. And he's gone. Gone. See ya. Gone. Did he set up any kind of a organization, fund, nonprofit? If he didn't, I'm glad in some ways. But it wasn't like this guy had a lifelong commitment to avenging the death of his son. Didn't do that. He was there to push the energy. He was there to incite indignity, injustice, right? Being incensed. And a lot of these people, they have absolutely no real emotional current except for anger, some kind of, phony anger. Like, I never saw that guy shed one tear. Go back to the shooting in Roanoke, Virginia, with the phony news crew and all that bullshit. And then the gal's father, who was an actor, did all these commercials. Another guy, I'm gonna avenge her death. I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life. And where is he now? He came on like Guns N' Roses, but where is he now? He's nowhere to be found. And another guy, even though he was an actor, didn't do a really good job of the emotional thing. He was like, no wonder you only did commercials. You can't cry. But these events have been coming at us in rapid fire succession. And I don't know what it'd be like to be 12, 13, 14 years old, 11 years old, coming of age as these events exploded like poisonous and toxic fungus around our country and around the world, seemingly on a weekly basis. I would not know what that would be like. But I have an idea. And if I was paying attention and I was sensitive, it would probably affect me. It would probably traumatize me. And then what they do after the trauma is they drop in the programs It's exactly what they did after the Parkland shooting. Who was there after the Parkland shooting to rally, rouse, and organize America's youth? It was the Sunrise Project. They were ready. They were ready to roll. They were ready to go in and take advantage of the trauma and then begin to groom your children. And to do this under the guise of initially what appears to be climate change. Oh, that's something we can all believe in. Oh, that's a good thing. We got to take care of the earth. We got to think of future generations. Yes. Let's reduce our carbon footprint. Good people. Doing good work. And once they get your kids in there on the climate change thing, oh boy, then it begins to change. Shift. And what group was really, playing a pretty significant role in these protests? It was the Sunrise Project, right? So they went from climate change, zero carbon, to Black Lives Matter. They basically flipped these kids, okay? So these are actually subversive groups. They're subversive groups, and they're being trained and run by highly organized, well-trained people that come out of the same social Marxist school that absolutely created and mastered the art of psychology. It goes right back to Bernays, which we talked about on Sunday night. These are the people that run these groups, and they've got the playbooks, man. They got the Saul Alinsky playbook, they got the Gene Sharp playbook, and they are giving our children bit by bit the keys to that playbook. They are grooming our children to revolt against us, and we're seeing it right now. To revolt against their parents, society, the country. It doesn't matter. They're writing the blank check for revolution. And it doesn't really matter, right? Doesn't matter what it is. We just know, or they just know, that it has something to do with something bad, and that something bad is here now, and it existed some other point in time. The badness had to start somewhere. So eradicate the badness that started somewhere. We have to eradicate the badness that is here now, which means everything. So this is nihilism. This is nihilism that's masquerading as a social movement, and they've been programmed. Now, if you go back and you look at the 1960s, like, the rise of the Weather Underground. And I know a fair amount about the Weather Underground. I've studied the Weather Underground. I know who the players are. They're very subversive. And by the way, what's really interesting about the Weather Underground is that there are definite connections with the CIA. Definite connections with the CIA. They came in funded. They came in hard. They blitzed SDS. They took over SDS. And you look at the people who were running SDS, which was Students for a Democratic Society, and they wanted to stop the Vietnam War. And guess what? I think stopping the Vietnam War probably would have been a good thing. It probably would have been a good thing. Probably shouldn't have been there in the first place. That was the French territory. But the French had already been through their problems with Algeria. They did not want another Algeria on their hands. They were war weary. De Gaulle wanted no part of it. De Gaulle went from a hawk to a dove. They also controlled the heroin trade. They'd get heroin out of that area of the world, and they would move it into Marseille and France, and then distribute it throughout Europe. So somebody else had to take over that heroin trade. That's a big part of it. That's one of the main reasons why we were the many reasons, destabilization, all kinds of other stuff. Now, the threat of communism is quite real, by the way. It's quite real. But the irony is that while we were fighting a war against communism in Vietnam, communism was fighting a war against us here in the United States. And I'm going to prove it to you in about 20 seconds, maybe in a minute. So we've been going through this for a while now. But when we look at somebody like the Weather Underground, who were really gaining momentum, and by the way, this was a time when the FBI and the CIA had very, very different kinds of agendas. Different kinds of agendas. I'm not a huge J. Edgar Hoover guy, trust me. I mean, the guy was a freak. He was a total freak, and he was blackmailed all the way through his career as being the head of the FBI. And of course, the Soviets were blackmailing him. But there were enough people inside of the FBI at that time that were kind of, how do I say this? They weren't autonomous from J. Edgar Hoover. But there were people inside of the FBI that had some power. And they were connected to this idea of, maybe that the country actually meant something, the Constitution meant something, and maybe if they could protect capitalism along the way, that was an added bonus. Okay. Nothing's altruistic. So what happened with the Weather Underground as they were gaining considerable momentum, although they overplayed their hand. They overplayed their hand when they went in for Days of Rage, which was the October riots that they had set for Chicago. And Bill Ayers talks about this. This was going to be their moment, right? This was their George Floyd moment. They were going to go in hard. And they were going to use the death of Fred Hampton, by the way, as another kind of potential for the George Floyd moment with the Weather Underground. Didn't work. Because I'll tell you why it didn't work. Because the FBI was fucking with the Black Panthers and the FBI was fucking with the Weather Underground. Larry Grathwold was an FBI agent and he had infiltrated the Weather Underground. So once Days of Rage was a big fizzle, they were expecting, 5,000 people to show up in Chicago and just do what they did in American cities about 3 weeks ago to Chicago. And Ayers looked around and he saw about 250 people and he knew they were fucked, but they had to go anyway. They had to go in anyway. So the first business that they bashed was a bank. Symbolic, of course. And then the cops just tore their ass apart. And then the Weather Underground started to experience these defeats, right? But so they really went underground. They were the Weathermen, and then they were the Weather Underground. So what happened is that the FBI went into full harassment mode with them. They did not let them sleep. They would go through their apartment. They knew where they were. They'd go through their apartments while they were gone. They would turn their shit inside out. They knew that their phones were tapped. They were always looking over their shoulder because the FBI was making sure that they would not get comfortable. Now, it did not stop them from creating havoc and blowing things up and killing people and having people actually go to prison, like Chesa Boudin's parents, members of the Weather Underground. But that's what they did, and they broke them. The FBI broke the Weather Underground. That's what happened. They broke them. They forced them further and further and further into isolation to the point where they couldn't even really communicate with one another. They were on a need-to-know basis, all that stuff. So they began to come up, right? They began to surface. And it was about a 10-year odyssey, but Bernardine Dorn and the rest of them began to surface, turn themselves in, because they could not continue the revolution. What's also interesting is, again, during that time, Neptune moves into Sagittarius and away from Scorpio, which is the underworld, right? And in Sagittarius, it's about expansion. So even astrologically, they were forced to move up and to expand the potential for their own lives. And boy, they did, didn't they? So what we're dealing with now is we're dealing with a vast network of mini Weather Undergrounds. And they've been allowed to proliferate. They have been allowed to, whether it's the Sunrise Project or Momentum, if not now, whatever these groups are, they've been allowed to proliferate. And they've been allowed to go in and basically re-engineer the heads of our children, whether it's in the college campuses across America or our high schools. And this is what's happened. And this is why we're dealing with what we're dealing with. And so they like to say that racism is systemic. Mind control is systemic. It is systemic. It has now infiltrated our system in our society to the point where it is pervasive. It becomes more the norm than not. But, this idea of logos continues to shine through our experiences in our lives. We saw it with Bubba Wallace trying to play a Jussie Smollett. And then I watched his interview with Don Lemon. It was embarrassing. Even Don Lemon thought it was embarrassing. He's like, holy fuck. I got this guy on here now, and he is Swiss cheese. Like, what is this doing to our movement? What is this doing to me? Like, that was a bad moment for Don Lemon. A bad moment for Bubba Wallace. Really bad. Really, really bad. A bad moment for his parents, the people who raised him. And this is the thing that blows my mind. If you think about this, right? How do you get to be a NASCAR driver? You just show up one day and fill a little application. Hi, I'm Bubba Wallace. I'd like to be a NASCAR driver. No, you don't do that. You have to race. You have to race. You have to go up all through all these circuits. And if you're a racer, it is not a cheap hobby. It's not a cheap hobby at all. You have to have equipment and very sophisticated equipment. You have to have people that can fix your equipment. You have to go on a circuit, right? You go on a circuit, that takes time. It takes money. You got to have a trailer. You got to stay at hotels, right? It's like being on a baseball travel team, but on steroids, high octane. And so you move up through the ranks, and Bubba Wallace came through the NASCAR or Winston NASCAR Truck Series because they actually have trucks that you race, right? So in order for him to get from a go-kart to a truck, that's a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of investment from his parents, from the organizations that run the events. Like if Bubba Wallace tried to do that in a place like, say, Turkey, and I'm sure Turkey's a fine country, has its beautiful monuments and everything. Well, first of all, they don't have a NASCAR series in Turkey. Second of all, it's probably not going to be supported along the way. Or let's say Bubba Wallace wanted to do that in China. Let's say you want to do that in China. Would China be able to like foster Bubba Wallace's career as a driver? The answer to that is big fat center of a donut. No. Now he might be able to do in places in Europe because you could race go-karts in Europe and you can move up to the Formula One circuit. And a lot of racers do that, right? But this country allowed Bubba Wallace that opportunity and fostered Wallace's, progression and ascent right into NASCAR. And then what does he do? He politicizes the whole thing, and it's like instant gratification. He had not won. He had not even placed, by the way. He had not even placed in any NASCAR event. Not even placed. He'd been in some races. He's fairly new. He'd been there about 2 or 3 years, maybe 3 years. He haven't even placed. I looked at his record. He wasn't even in the top 3. You got to go, win, place, and show. He never got to show. But he did have his 15 minutes of fame by claiming there was a noose in his garage. So is this a byproduct of somebody who was not able to achieve a certain level of success and grab that lower rotten hanging fruit, right? The instant gratification fruit, the thing that's right there, right? Is that what he did? Is that part of it? Was it politically motivated? Like, what was really going on behind, sometimes it's not just one thing. Sometimes there's a lot of things that converge into that moment, which make that thing happen. But nobody will ever look at him the same. And in a lot of ways, I feel sorry for him. And he did this speech, Donald, it's embarrassing. I don't even want to play it to you, but about how he's so good that people hate on him every day. You got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me, right? You've got to be kidding me. This is somebody who has not been successful on the NASCAR circuit, but he's so good. He's so good that people just going to hate him, and he has to put up with it every day. It just blows my mind. Blows my mind. And he, instead of like, man, I'm so grateful. I'm living the American dream. I don't know about you people. I'm living the American dream. I'm mixed race. My mother is black and my father's so-called white, and I'm the progeny. I'm their progeny, and I'm the symbol of unity, right? These two worlds have come together in me, and I am living the American dream. I get to race NASCAR. This is such a wonderful thing for me in my life and my family, and I hope I inspire people. He didn't do that, though. He didn't do that. He shit on the American dream. And maybe the American dream is really a dream now, fading very, very distantly in the past. He shit on the American dream. And I'm not here to wave the flag or anything like that. It's not, but this was a system that fostered and nurtured his growth all the way to NASCAR. People supported him. They supported him. His parents, sponsors, people supported him. And he gets there and he just takes a big dump on it, you know? And I think that might be more generational than anything else. In a lot, I hate to say it. And I'm not condemning everybody part of that generation. I'm not, but I've seen, you know, you live a little bit. And I'm sure when I was a kid at that age, I probably had my own version of that. So I'm not going to sit here from my ivory tower and look down and say, oh, you know, Bubba bad. But there's something there. You know, there's something there. And I'd like to just like contrast that with Ayrton Senna. And Ayrton Senna, if you want to, Ayrton Senna was very human. If you ever want to watch a great documentary, watch Senna. And Senna was a rich playboy from Brazil. Grew up wealthy. Again, you have to have money to do these race sports. And he was, in a lot of ways, very, very humble. Very humble. He was a playboy. You know, he took advantage of his position in life, but he was also very devout. Like the guy was really religious. When he talks about, it was like when he was at super high speed on the track, like he talked about like being at one with God, like at like 200 miles an hour. It's really a trip. Okay. I want to show you like sort of the, how do I say this? I want to show you two people who were engaged in the civil rights movement of the 1960s. One of whom was an actual person that was elevated to leadership status inside of that movement. The other was an actual infiltrator of, guess what? The FBI. It's what the FBI did. And I'm going to play you about 8 minutes of video from a documentary. It's a really interesting documentary. And it's about how communism fosters social movements. And it makes the connection with the civil rights movement back in the 1960s. You know, and was the civil rights movement a bad movement? I'd say no, it wasn't. You know, it wasn't. You know, segregation in the South, you know, I'm not in favor of it. Although now, ironically, they're bringing segregation back, but in a different kind of way, right? Just go to Chaz. No, you got to stay over here. This is the white only area. We're on a different timeline now. Anyway, but so yeah, there's some good things about the civil rights movement. You know, it's like, you know, we're all equal. We're all equal. Although the Civil Rights Act signed in by LBJ, that's a whole other show. But I'm going to show you this video. So pay close attention. Pay very close attention to what both of these people say, because what they're saying is exactly what's happening now. It's the same players. They're using, in some ways, the same playbook, only now it's on steroids with social media and more. Oh, and the corporations are in. All right, so let me play this for you. You guys will have your minds blown. Hey, it's about 8 minutes. Enjoy it. I guess if you can enjoy it. I think it's enjoyable. Okay, so here we go. This is civil rights and communism. Now, this guy was on the inside. He was an insider. When I mean insider, he was a guy that was actually trained by the Soviets at the University of Moscow. He'll actually talk about this. Okay, here we go.
I am Leonard Patterson. When I was a young man, only 22 years old, I joined the Communist Party. I was a member of the National Executive Committee of the American Young Communist League. In 1930, I was the official communist candidate for election to New York State Assembly. I knew Gus Hall and other top-ranking American communists very well because I trained with them at the Lenin University in Moscow. I joined the party because I honestly thought the communists were trying to help American Negroes. I broke away from the party when it became clear to me what the communists were really up to. was to use the Negro people in this country as cannon fodder in a violent and bloody revolution aimed at the establishment of the American Soviet dictatorship. It was that simple, and it's still that simple today. Make no mistake about it. What is happening in the United States right now under the banner of civil rights is exactly what has happened in China, in Cuba, in Algeria, and many other places around the world. When I was studying communist tactics and strategy in Moscow, my instructors emphasized the importance of using honest grievances and popular slogans as a smokescreen to cover up the true nature of the revolution. We were taught how to use propaganda and arouse the emotion of the masses. We learned how to set one group against the other and to make them hate each other. We learned the necessity of having martyrs. And we were even told how to create our own martyrs if they did not imagine the result from the atmosphere of hate. We were taught the importance of getting large masses of people into the streets for marches and demonstrations. And finally, we were instructed in ways to take off riots and make them spread and to keep them going. When I returned to the United States, I was immediately given practical training. I participated in so-called nonviolent demonstrations that were deliberately calculated to irritate white people into violence against us. I personally was in charge of organizing a march on Washington to dramatize the struggle for his case. In New York, about 1935, a Negro boy was reported killed by the owner of a store while in the act of stealing some merchandise. Communist Party headquarters decided to make a march out of the boy. So we went right to work, putting out handbills and holding open air meetings. In less than a half hour after we started, there was a race riot on 125th Street, complete with smashing windows of white storekeepers, looting, and all the rest. I'm not speaking of things I read about. These are things I personally participated in.
I'm Julia Brown. For 9 years, I was a member of the Communist Party, serving as an undercover agent for the FBI. During that time, I learned that the communist conspiracy had been planning and working for years to bring violent revolution to America. It was to be a communist revolution. But the great majority of the American people would not be allowed to realize that until it had already happened. If all goes according to the communist blueprint, Americans will believe that the chaos and violence has something to do with civil rights. Our enemies were quick to find our weakest point for their attack. They knew that racial differences could provide them with an excellent wedge to divide our people. Their strategy simply has been to keep hammering on that wedge, to drive it deeper into our social structure, to open all wounds that have long since healed, and deliberately to create new ones wherever they can. Now, this doesn't mean that there isn't a legitimate need for the advancement of civil rights for many of our Negro citizens. Of course, there is a need there. Otherwise, communist agitators posing as civil rights leaders could never hope to enlist massive support for their schemes. The aspirations of Negroes for full equality were not created by communists, but they are used by communists in such a way that idealistic Americans of all races can be tricked into implementing the communist blueprint for revolution. having been on the inside of the Communist Party, it's easy for me to recognize this revolutionary agitation in disguise. But the average American finds it's hard to believe that something as worthy and noble sounding as a civil rights movement could possibly be a communist maneuver.
Communism must be filled with non-communist hands. The revolutionary accepts reform in order to use it as a cover for his illegal work.
By concealing the true communist objectives behind appealing slogans and pretended humanitarian goals, the conspirators are able to dupe hundreds of uninformed opportunists and misguided idealists into supplying the non-communist hands needed in the overthrow of this republic.
We can and must write in a language which sows among the masses hate, revulsion, and scorn toward those who disagree with us. Members and front organizations must continually embarrass, discredit, and degrade our critics. When obstructionists become too irritating, label them as fascist or Nazi or anti-Semitic. Constantly associate those who oppose us with those names which already have a bad smell. The association will, after enough repetition, become fact in the public mind.
By duping the American public into turning a deaf ear to the voices of warning because the topics were controversial or because the patriots themselves had been ridiculed as extremists, racists, fright peddlers, the conspirators were ready to move one step closer to their hidden goals by precipitating mob violence.
Riots, demonstrations, street battles, detachments of the Revolutionary Army. Such are the stages in the development of the popular uprising. The Communist Party will educate and organize the working masses for mass strikes and mass demonstrations. It is through struggles that the working masses are prepared for the final conflict for power. As these strikes grow in number and intensity, they acquire political character through unavoidable collision and open combat with the capitalistic state. Mass action culminates in insurrection and civil war.
So there you go. It's all right there. I mean, I don't know what more I need to say about that. That's like 9 minutes of your life where you get the whole playbook. You just get the whole playbook. It's right there. And that woman was a badass, huh? She was like in the Commie Party for 9 years. And, you know, she was right. She was right. You know, there are things that needed to be done. You know, there are schools and campuses in the South where, you know, so-called Black African Americans could not attend. And that's just not right. It's not right. You know, it's like, hey, this is open for everybody. But if you want to have a school for your own, or, you know, that should be available too, by the way. I mean, there's a whole group of historical Black colleges and universities, HBCU, which for a long time were just historically Black, and that's okay. Right? It's okay. I mean, every now and then somebody would pop in and show up, and there'd be, you know, non-white, non-Black. There was this one guy who played quarterback for Grambling. He was white. I don't know how that happened. He played quarterback for Grambling. And what's really funny about that guy is that Bruce Jenner played him in a TV movie. So Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn Jenner, played the only white quarterback in the history of Grambling University. So I'm really okay. You want to have your own universities? I think that's okay too. I mean, I'm really okay with that. You know, it's fine. It's fine. You want to have an all-girls school? Make it an all-girls school. All-boys school, all-boys school. I don't care. But colleges that are open to everybody should be open to everybody. Clearly, especially if they're being financed by the state. It's a big deal. But there's the playbook right there. Does any of that sound familiar? Of course it does. That's what we're going through right now. And the thing that was really interesting is the story about the kid who got supposedly killed for stealing something in the store. Like, where have we heard that before? Right? That's like right out of Michael Brown. And the martyr thing is really important. The martyr thing is really important. They have to have martyrs. And George Floyd became a martyr. Whatever happened to whoever George Floyd is or was or wasn't, became a martyr. And that was the kerosene they needed. That was the fuel they needed to throw in the bonfire. And then look what happened after that. A lot of other things are taking place right now that are again, a result of this massive mind control operation that we're in. I'm going to show you an example here real quick. This is kind of the moving towards the new norm. Let's see, what do we have here? Okay, so there was this guy who's a football fan of a team called Burnley. And Burnley was having a soccer match, football as they call it. And he flew this over the stadium when they were playing. So you know he's going to lose his job. The girlfriend of the man who flew a White Lives Matter banner over a football match in the UK. This is the girlfriend now, not the guy. The girlfriend has been fired from her job after refusing to take intensive racial sensitivity training. Good for her. Good for her. You know, basically the intensive racial sensitivity training is brainwashing, trauma-induced brainwashing. Keep your job, get on your knees, grovel, and even if you are lying moving forward, basically parrot everything that we're telling you to parrot. The banner was seen trailing behind a plane over Manchester City's Etihad Stadium on Monday before the club's Premier League game with Burnley. It provoked widespread condemnation and a police investigation. Oh my, jeez. Police, they're gonna fucking have a police investigation for a guy who flies a banner. Although authorities, so you know what's interesting? It doesn't say White Lives Matter more, Burnley, right? White Lives Matter more than Black Lives, Burnley. It says White Lives Matter. That's it. Now that is an incendiary, revolutionary, fascist act, which goes right back to what we saw on that brief 8-minute snippet from that film. Very good film, by the way, on the subversion of the civil rights movement. All right. So here we go. A little bit more. The person responsible for the banner, Burnley fan Jamie Heppel, faced a social media witch hunt. He responded with a Facebook post that said, "I'd like to take this time to apologize to absolutely fucking nobody." Jamie Heppel, you are the person of the week. You're the person of the week. You're the person, I don't care. You're the person of the week. To absolutely fucking. However, after a Twitter mob, they couldn't get him, so now they're going to go after his girlfriend. However, after a Twitter mob discovered the employment details of his girlfriend, Megan, these are the NPCs. These are the little Manchurian candidates. However, after Twitter mob discovered the employment details of his girlfriend, Megan, she was fired by Solace Foot Health and Reflexology simply for being guilty by association. A statement released by the company said they were willing to try to help Megan. They cared so much about Megan. They were willing to help her by paying for intensive racial sense. That's not just racial sensitivity training, or not even just sensitivity. It should be just sensitivity training, right? Now it's racial sensitivity. Now it's intensive. Like, what the fuck does that mean? Are they going to hook her up to electrodes and shock her? Are they going to shock the monkey, Megan? But that Megan had evidently refused to be re-educated and would rather leave, meaning she was effectively fired for being the boyfriend of a man who thinks white lives matter. The girlfriend, hope not hate exposed. The girlfriend of the Burnley banner flyer has been booted from her job for being guilty by association. of a non-crime. Notice the offer of re-education. Meanwhile, Cambridge University professor tweets, white lives don't matter. Presumably, a statue has been proposed for her. We live in such crazy, crazy times. Let's just do this. Let's read this. Earlier, we posted a statement saying we were willing to try and help Meghan by paying for intensive racial sensitivity training, despite knowing the Solace's reputation would come into question. Oh, they were taking a big risk. A big risk. No, you weren't. We felt that by trying to make a difference, the overall outcome would be better for everyone in our community. After several conversations with Meghan tonight, however, we have all decided that what is best for Meghan and best for Solace is to end her employment with immediate effect. Obviously, it is now well known that Jill, one of the directors of Solace, used to go by the name of Jill Heppel and is Jake Heppel's mother. We want to get abundantly clear that in no way does Jill or Solace agree or condone any actions made by Jake or Meghan. So it's a family affair, apparently, at Solace Health, Foot Health and Reflexology. Like, this isn't even really a stupid ass corporation. It's not even a corporation. It's a family. It's a business for foot health. There's a Mars and Pisces kind of moment for you right there. There's your mundane astrology in action. Reflexology, foot health. The mom works there. So what is the mom going to do now? In order to keep your job, you're going to have to denounce your children. Or you have to denounce your wife. Or you have to denounce your husband. Or your children have to denounce you. This is a common tactic that they use in the world of communist, socialist propaganda. They do it. That's what they do. You have to denounce the people. And you write a confession, right? You basically rat on your parents or whatever, and then you denounce them. You're forced to. And this is what the mother's being forced to do. This is where we are right now. And it's very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous because this is not the end game. This is not the end goal. No, the end goal is something much, much darker and much, much more sinister. Ole Damagard and I get into that tomorrow. And it really is very much connected to Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 and the cities of tomorrow. That's where all this is headed. This is just a warm-up. This is just a psychological shakedown and warm-up to what's coming. And we're in it right now. Like we are in it. This is it. We're in it. We are in this theoretical conflict of very, very profound spiritual energies. We're in a big conflict right now. It may not look like it, or maybe it does, but we're there. And we can resolve the conflict. You have to resolve the conflict inside of yourself. That's first and foremost. Once you resolve the conflict inside of yourself, and that conflict inside of yourself is multifaceted. Because a lot of us are conflicted. We're conflicted about a lot of things. We think one thing about this thing, one thing about that thing. We think one thing about this person, another thing about that person. So we have to resolve these conflicts inside of ourselves. And there are ways to do it. There are tools to do it. It's some conflicts are more difficult to resolve. Others are not as difficult to resolve. But that's the key to all this. You resolve the conflicts inside of yourself. It's easier to engage in what's going on in the world. Much easier. So one of the things that I would suggest from that perspective is here's where I find when I talk with people and I do readings with people, here's where I find where the greatest conflict is. It's about being here now. And Ole and I talk about this, right? There's only the now. There's only the now. And I know a lot of people look around and say, oh, gee, I wish it was, I don't recognize the world anymore. The world is crazy. The world is insane. I know a lot of people that are freaked out. They have anxiety. They want to know where to live, where the best. And by the way, there are better places to live than others. I'll be clear about that. But no place ultimately is really safe. You need to remember that. The only safe place you have is right here. And that's something, that's a conflict you have to resolve. And we're all in the process of that. Right? We're all in the process of that. And there's some physical locations safer than others. But the main conflict that everybody needs to wrap their heads around and resolve right now is that there is no going back. There is no going back. They will not let off the gas. Whatever we were prior to 3/11, we are no more. That world is over. So if you have visions about, having kind of a fun, gay, frivolous life, where everybody was happy and shaking their asses at dance parties or whatever, those days are over. They're done. It doesn't mean you can't throw on some music and find some cool tunes to but the time stamp for that stuff is over. And the sooner you get to that place, you will eliminate a major conflict inside of yourself. You just got to get there. You got to get there. You got to get here right now. You do that and you'll resolve 90% of your conflicts just by doing that inside of yourself. Then the rest work themselves out. Oh, I'm so conflicted about my family. My family's rejected me, or my family doesn't believe in this stuff. I know it's tough. Resolve the conflict that nothing will be the same post 3/11. And if somebody from your family, wakes up and smells the napalm, hey, great. If they don't, you got to be real about it. You got to move on. Even Jesus talks about that. He's in Samaria. Jesus is in Samaria. And, he's having a rough time. The people of Samaria are not really accepting this dude. They're ruffians. And then Jesus' family, Sananda's family comes up to him and says, hey, come on, come back with us. Come with us. These people are rough people. And he says, no, these are my people now. And in that moment, he's like, you must leave your family. That's kind of what he's talking. It's a very interesting teaching moment. And in that moment, he, begins to win over the people of Samaria. Oh, he's one of us. And then he can begin to instruct them and teach them at a higher level, right? So you have to be prepared to do that. Resolve your conflicts. We all have them. And some of them are not easily resolved. But if they're not easily resolved, then try at a certain point, just put them on the back burner. Don't put them on the front burner. There will be a time to resolve those things that are in some ways irresolvable. And you'll know that. You'll know when that moment comes. When you're in the moment and the opportunity arises, you will know when it comes. And when it does come, you take full advantage of it. But in the meantime, resolve the biggest conflict in your life and our lives right now, that things are not going back. We talked about Mercury retrograde, and it's like, clockwork, masks, go back home. Greg Abbott saying people need to stay home, and the COVID tests. Look, I don't want to get into the whole COVID thing, but I do want to show you one thing before I split. Actually, I want to show you two things. I want to show you one thing before I leave. And I hope that I can maybe address it tomorrow a bit more before the Ole interview, which I've pre-recorded. I just want to show you this thing. This is pretty interesting, actually. Let me do this. Where is it? Okay, so this story broke yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. It's a very interesting story. Drowning ruled cause of death for 3 in New Jersey report. I'm just using this local Fox thing, right? 3 family members found dead in the backyard pool they recently purchased. They just moved there. Home drowned, local officials said Tuesday. Authorities had been investigating if Bharat Patel, 62, his 33-year-old daughter-in-law, Nisha Patel, and her 8-year-old had been electrocuted. The number 8 been coming up a lot, especially in relation to George Floyd. In the above-ground pool in East Brunswick, but ruled that out Tuesday. The 3 lived in the house on Clearview Road, which the family bought in April for $451,000. Neighbors on the leafy suburban street recalled hearing screaming from the backyard Monday. We believe the mother was screaming from inside the pool for help. A next-door neighbor who said she did not hear any of the initial commotion said on Tuesday the cops initially came to her door thinking the scream had originated from her home. So there's the pool. Like, how the fuck do you drown in a pool like that? I mean, it is an above-ground kiddie pool. You got 3 people. How do you drown in a pool like that? I told them not here. They ran next door. Police attempted CPR, but pronounced the 3 victims dead at the scene. The entire East Brunswick community is shocked. Our condolences go out to the family. Investigators originally suspected victims had been electrocuted because the pool is above ground. When an electrician's van pulled up the house Monday, neighbors fear an electrical current may have doomed the family members. It's going around they were electrocuted. The family's next door neighbor who asked that her name not be revealed. The fact they had an electrician's truck show up shortly thereafter. I mean, it wouldn't make sense that 3 people just drowned right away like that with an adult there. No, it doesn't make sense. The former owner who had sold the house to the family told the Post he never had problems with the pool. Law enforcement sources said the pool varied in depth, with a deep end or a section in the middle that was several feet. It couldn't have been more than 5 feet at the most, maybe 6 at the most. They didn't know if they were strong. When reaching deeper water, what the fuck are they in the Atlantic Ocean? They're in a pool. They're in an above ground pool. Let me show you why this is kind of a significant story. And I'm not willing to make any major connections at this time, but Nisha Patel, this is one of the women that drowned. She's an Institute Fellow and Executive Director of the U.S. Partnership on Mobility from Poverty at the Urban Institute, supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The partnership is a nonpartisan group of leaders, experts, and practitioners working to identify promising interventions to make real, lasting progress against persistent poverty in America. So she was there for 20 years, 2 decades. This is a high-ranking person inside of the Gates organization. She's an Institute Fellow and Executive. This is not a plebe. This is somebody with status inside of that organization. This is somebody at a strategic and decision-making level. She was previously deputy director of Ascend at the Aspen Institute. There's your globalist think tank, where she led national efforts to expand 2-generation approaches to improve outcomes for children and their parents. Before that, Patel was a program officer in the U.S. program at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where she managed a portfolio focused on increasing post-secondary success through community partnerships in policy development, as well as special initiatives. She went to Vanderbilt, had an MSW with a concentration in social and economic development from Washington University, St. Louis. My goal is to generate great ideas and move them into action with a focus on solutions that create economic opportunity in the United States. This is not somebody who is a lower level player. This is somebody who is, while not a complete game manager at the elite level, is somebody who is very close to that. Why, at this moment in time, did that woman, her father, and her child mysteriously drown in that pool? I don't have any answers. But the connections clearly are very mysterious. The timing is very mysterious. Why did she scream? Very suspicious. Very suspicious. And if somebody is out there, who I know there are, like this would be an Amazing Polly thing. Like Amazing Polly, I'm sure you're already on it. And hopefully she'll have a video up in the next week or so, the details who this woman was and what she was doing and what she was working on. Because I think it's important. These things don't happen in a bubble. Speaking of bubbles, that's what the NBA is calling their new summer league experience, where they're going to somehow finish out the season. It sounds absolutely fucking horrific. They call it the bubble, and the bubble is going to be in Orlando, Florida. And essentially, players will be isolated in their rooms. They're going to have isolation up the freaking wazoo until, of course, when they play. When they play, they can sweat and, talk to each other and all that stuff, right? So this is the NBA's attempt to somehow finish out the season. And not all the players are going to play. There are players that are declining for various reasons. But it's interesting that they're calling it the bubble. All right, let me check in with you guys real quick. Let's see what we got. And I have one more thing to play for you, and it's really funny. I got to leave you with some humor today. You're going to laugh your ass off at this. You see, I'm not always doom and gloom. But I do like a good laugh every now and then. Let's see. Trying to get to the new. Come on, you comment this. All right, so I just want to refresh the screen because I can't get up to the new comments. So I just may go dark for a minute. Don't worry, I'll be right back. See, it wasn't gone that long. I'm back. Let's see. What else do we have here? Sue says, wow, the case is highly suspicious. Yep, totally. Was the water tested for poisons? That's a really good point, Tessa. That's a really good point. Tessa Dick in the house. Good point. Another warning threat to others on snitch fence? Maybe. Steve says she knew too much. I would agree with that. But what did she know? Stan Mick says it has happened. The story were featured in our national magazine this week, so it should have huge ramifications. Expendable middle management. I'm not sure she was middle management. She was a fellow, right? She was an institute fellow and director. It's a little above middle management. Little above. That's fairly high level. If you hold those titles, director and a fellow, those are you're privy to strategy. Middle management, you're not privy to strategy. That's kind of need to know basis. That level, you're privy to strategy. You know where things are going. If you're a director, you've got to direct people. That's what a director does. And an institute fellow is fairly significant, right? So she was a little bit higher than middle management. Somebody was talking about that woman on another report yesterday. Didn't mention the death was about her Gates connections and other fishy groups. Well, that's why you come here. Let's see what else we have. There have been several deaths of higher-ups in Gates organization. So is the Gates organization the new Clinton Foundation? Oh, Steve Bing. We didn't even talk about Steve Bing. That is like, whoa. Steve Bing was a really powerful guy. Really powerful guy. Yeah, Michael says when you are issuing $17 billion in grants, you're definitely above middle management. Yeah. That's true. Steve Bing supposedly took a concrete dive a couple days ago. There's a guy deeply connected to the Clinton Foundation, father of Liz Hurley's kid, comes from a very wealthy family, movie producer, produced The Polar Express with Tom Hanks. By the way, word on the street is Tom Hanks isn't even around anymore. I don't want to get into that right now. That's a whole other can of worms. But the Steve Bing thing is really weird. Very strange. And they said, oh, he was all cooped up from complications of COVID-19, stir crazy, whatever. I don't know about that. When you have a lot of money, a lot of money, a lot of power, unless your soul is just completely rotting away from the inside out, and there's still hope for that, by the way, you don't do that. You just don't do that. You just don't do a concrete cannonball. You don't do that. A mysterious death. Clearly. Who is Steve Bing? Steve Bing was a major contributor to the Clintons. Big time contributor to the Clintons and the Democratic National Party. He's a movie producer. He's produced a lot of movies. And he produced The Polar Express with Tom Hanks. He is the father of Liz Hurley's kid. He's very connected. Steve Bing is very, very connected. And he comes from a very wealthy family. There you go. Tom Hanks is going to be the star in World War II Greyhounds. Well, we'll see. I love your name, Hucklebuck 411. That is great. Great, great name. His mother controlled him. Jennifer Rubin would know. Jennifer Rubin's our inside. She's our Hollywood insider. She would know that stuff. Look at that. I used to date Steve Bing. Where are you going to find these synchronicities, by the way? Where the heck? Every day now is just, right? Steve Bing. Here's Jennifer Rubin. Used to date him. I'm sorry. I think synchronicities are agnostic. They're everywhere, right? But they just seem to be popping up like crazy here. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Amazing. All right. I'm going to leave you a little bit of humor. Little bit of humor. That's actually quite funny. But, before I do, again, we live really in amazing times. And when you watch the interview with Ole tomorrow, you will see that, right? You will see that he is this guy. This guy is like a lighthouse, and that's exactly what he's talking about. Exactly what he's talking about. So we live in amazing times. There's amazing opportunity here and now. Okay, my neighbor's mowing his lawn. Let me play you this video. You're going to laugh your ass off. I'll see you guys tomorrow on the Friday Firecast. Love you all. Take care. Here we go.
Since I'm not on this account.
No problem.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sean.
Sure. Let's just start off with January 2020. Now, consumer spending is up. If you look at the graph right below.
What page are we on?
I'm sorry, we're on page 12, the second graph from the top.
Okay.
Daniel, turn your camera off.
All right. So if you look, we're at 0.15% higher than 2019. We started this quarter off at 2.75%.
Holy shit.
Daniel.
God.
I don't think he's
Daniel.
January.
Can you type for us?
Daniel.
Daniel.
Call Mika.
Oh my God.
You call Daniel on his cell. Call Daniel on his cell. How do we turn this feed off?
Wow.
We can't.
Oh, hell no.
Daniel. Oh my God. Daniel is the host. Holy shit.
The moral of the story: keep your webcam off when you're not using it. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye for now.